I don't believe that either of the other two candidates on the stage have ever voted in the legislative setting, so I have nothing to add to that. I would just reiterate that the immigration problems that we're having can be solved through deferred prosecutions for some minor crimes that would avoid the immigration consequences and keep families together.
Move on to the next question. I believe Ms. Ruff. One more question? Okay. All right. Well, this will be the last question, then we'll move on to closing arguments. In your opinion, does Arkansas law, as it stands now, authorize open carry of firearms? Please explain your position, and also please tell us what, if any, new legislation might be necessary to clarify the current law.
Sure. Under current Act 746, the law states that you may carry a firearm so long as you do so without the intent to unlawfully employ it against another person. This is exactly the sort of law that I was talking about, where there's ambiguity in the law enforcement and citizens do not agree, and particularly important that law enforcement doesn't understand what the law says. So I believe that an individual may carry so long as they do so without the intent to unlawfully employ it. I believe that it's problematic for our prosecutors, even more problematic for our members of law enforcement out on the streets. In you all's communities, you know folks that are, when they come up to a ball game or soccer match and they have a gun on their hip, well, that may be Joe, and Joe always carries a gun, and Joe has a concealed carry. And you may know that because you know folks in your community. Local law enforcement knows that. But if you go into a Denny's restaurant with your family and there's 6 people sitting there with handguns on their hip, you don't know who they are. And so I think our law needs to be cleared up, and that is exactly the sort of law I'm talking about. I am pro Second Amendment as they come. I have a concealed carry. I carry Glock 27/40 caliber, have the highest rating from the NRA, and I will protect our Second Amendment rights. But I do believe that we need to clear up this law so that way law enforcement officers know what the law is, and just as important, that citizens know what the law is.
Mr. Pack.
People have personal convictions about this, but I think it's pretty clear, whether you agree with that it should be open carry or not, I think the law does provide for open carry. It says it's unlawful if you have a purpose to attempt to unlawfully employ the gun against a person. You can break that down into 6 elements. Possess a gun, that's pretty simple. With a purpose, that's your intent. To attempt to unlawfully, that's like not in self-defense. Employ the gun, that's use the gun against a person. So if one of those elements is missing, you're not violating the law. This law says it's unlawful if these 6 things. It doesn't say how you should carry the gun, how it has to be concealed or not. For the common person reading the statute, that's how criminal statutes should be read, because those are the people that are being prosecuted under them. Personal views aside, you have to admit that it does provide for carry without a license. If you disagree with that, I think you've got another political agenda, or maybe you're trying to pander toward different sides. But I think it's a plain reading, and there was a law professor from the University of Arkansas who agrees with that, and he doesn't personally think that open carry should be allowed, but the law as read does provide for that.
Mr. Steele.
Certainly, I think it's up to the courts to interpret the law, and we'll see that at some point. I agree with, in most part, the Attorney General's opinion on this issue, and that is that there is circumstantial evidence that can be looked at here. If you pick somebody up on their way to an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife's home after sending multiple threats, and he or she is carrying a weapon, then certainly Act 746 will allow to use those circumstantial factors and file some kind of charge. But look, I'm a strong defender of the Second Amendment rights. I have a proven record on these issues, on voting on behalf of gun owners in Arkansas. And I supported open carry bills that applied outside of our cities and counties, outside of our cities, incorporated areas. And I think, if one of my constituents is checking his fence line in Howard County, he or she ought to be able to carry a weapon openly or concealed or however they want to. I think that's a Second Amendment right. I think since the early days, we've had some limitations for concealment and other things. There are other statutes at work here, concealed carry statutes, in addition to Act 746. And so it's not only 746 that law enforcement has to look to But I agree in large part with both the other candidates up here that 746 probably does need to be cleaned up a little bit, and just to be more clear. But I do strongly support that Second Amendment rights.
Ms. Rutland, anything to add?
Just, this is a prime example of where the Attorney General's office can come in while these bills are being discussed in committee and not just be a naysayer. As I know that you all probably sat in committee meetings or watched them online, and, you know, when the committee chairman says something, is this constitutional? Nope, not constitutional, bill goes out the window. That we need an Attorney General, an Attorney General's office who will work with the legislators, find out what their intent is, and say, is this what you all want to pass? And make sure that it's clear to the other members of the legislature that are passing this, that this is the intent.
Mr. Cash, anything to add?
I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter as well. I don't think criminal statutes should be used to shouldn't hold a criminal statute against somebody based on what may or may not have been in the minds of these legislators, you know, when they passed it. It clearly states the law there, with the purpose to attempt to unlawfully employ the gun. If you're not doing that, then you can carry without a license.
Mr. Steele, last word on this.
Well, ultimately, all of this is about the balance between your individual right, your Second Amendment, and being a danger to others. I think that we're awfully close to that balance, and as a strong defender of the Second Amendment, I'll continue to do so. But I will listen to law enforcement. I don't believe that we need bully law enforcement by having open carry protests and begging to be arrested to make some kind of point. I think we need to work with law enforcement to have a fair statute that is clear and protects our right to carry on, to bear arms.